Hey y'all, it's Danny with Escape Power Sports, and today I want to show you how to install a winch on your Can Am ATV. And in my opinion, installing a winch on your machine is one of the best ways to add to its capabilities on a budget. So full disclaimer, just because this job's very affordable does not necessarily mean it's going to be very quick or very easy. So I'd really like to encourage you to go ahead and watch the video all the way through as I take you step by step through the installation of this winch. Now I like to set aside a full Saturday afternoon and at least a 6-pack of beer for this job, so let's get started. So there's only 3 main parts to this job. We'll start by removing a few of the stock parts. In part 2, we'll bolt on our new winch and KFI mounting plate, and we'll finish up with tackling winch wiring. First step is yanking the plastic skid plate held on with these 4 Torx 30 bolts. I find it's helpful to bag and label the bolts and then tape them to the parts they came off with. Next, we can remove the 2 13mm bumper support bolts on each side. And then the 2 lower bumper bolts. These are also 13mm, but they do have a 13mm nut on the back, so I slid a 13mm wrench in at an angle to hold them still. Now the only thing left holding that bumper on is these 2 Torx 40 bolts with 13mm nuts. Next on the chopping block is the lower section of the bumper support bracket held on with its 10mm nut and bolt. Last up is removing the upper part of the bumper support bracket, which starts off easy with the Torx 30 bolt and 10mm nut on the back. But then it gets a little tricky when removing the 2 10mm nuts and bolts hiding behind the front fascia. I had to use several extensions and a swivel socket to reach it with the impact. So now that we've got the bike as naked as it needs to be for this job, we can move on to part 2, which is mounting the winch. We'll get started on the bench by mounting our new upper support bracket to the winch mounting plate with the 11mm bolts and washers. We'll want the fins facing towards the bike, and both of these parts and the hardware were included with the KFI winch plate. Now it's time to mount our new winch and fairlead bracket to the KFI winch plate. I used the 4 13mm bolts and lock washers that were included with the winch, and I was also sure to make sure the fairlead bracket ended up on the upper 2 bolts on the KFI winch plate. In hindsight, it would have been easier to pull out the winch cable now before installing it on the machine, securing the winch hook with the main pin and the little cotter pin. Can't forget our fancy little red strap thing. Now wrestling this whole contraption on is kind of a pain, but all I'm trying to do here is line up the holes and get it on there properly enough to get the top 2 bolts started. So here's that tricky part again, securing the upper support with the 2 10mm nuts and bolts we pulled out from behind the front fascia earlier. Thank you. Now I'll just carefully place the old bumper support brackets in our spare parts box since it won't be reinstalled. And we'll reinstall our bumper with the 13mm bolts and nuts on bottom and the Torx 40 bolts with their 13mm nuts on top. Almost forgot this Torx 30 and his 10mm nut on the back. Only thing left is to throw the front skid plate back on with its 4 Torx 30 bolts. Now these 2 are tough to get to with our new winch, but I just took my time and snugged them up by hand and finished the job with a set of pliers. And just like that, our new winch is mounted to the machine. It's a perfect time to make a run to the corner store for another 6-pack of beer and get ready for part 3 where we'll be tackling the wiring. So similar to mounting the winch, we're going to start by removing some plastic to get better access, starting with the seat, and then we'll remove the center cowl covering the air filter and the passenger side panel. All of these pieces will pop right out without tools required. So let's grab a flathead screwdriver or pop rivet pliers and remove the passenger inner fender well. Next, I snipped the zip ties holding this brake line and these wires in place. These factory wires actually run up to the pod where there's a plug-and-play connector for a worn Can Am winch switch, but since our budget-friendly Harbor Freight winch didn't come with any fancy Can Am connectors or switches, I figured it's best just to disregard them. So I figured this area would be a pretty good spot to mount our solenoid, seeing as it's between the battery and the winch, it'll be secure and it'll be out of the elements. So now that we found a pretty decent spot for the solenoid, I like to run the blue and yellow wires up towards the winch to make sure they'll reach from here and mark where I need to drill with a Sharpie. With the spot marked, it's time to drill the holes to match the bolts and nuts to secure the solenoid, or your self-tapping screws of choice. I ended up with a 5/32 bit to fit the small Phillips bolt and 7mm nut that were included with the winch. I also found it's a lot easier to attach the yellow and blue wires with their protective rubber boot before mounting the solenoid. The posts are also color coordinated and hold the wires with a 10mm nut. With the solenoid mounted up, we can route our yellow and blue wires to the winch and use our 10mm socket to attach them to the coordinating terminals on the winch. Can't forget our annoying little protective rubber boots for additional protection. So routing and securing wires with zip ties is really more of an art than a science, so I'll leave the details to your discretion. Next, we can attach the red power and black ground wire to the color coordinated posts on the solenoid and begin running the wires towards the battery. I know we established routing and securing wires with zip ties as an art, but a couple of the things I like to focus on is avoiding moving parts like the front drive shaft or shifter linkage, keeping them out of the weather and secure as possible, and definitely keeping them away from excessive heat like the header. At this point, I noticed the black wire is longer than the red wire and realized it's time to bolt on our circuit breaker to the end of the red wire nearest the battery with a 14mm socket and 13mm wrench. I'm also definitely a fan of wrapping the circuit breaker in electrical tape so it doesn't short out against the frame. Now we're finally to the fun part of any wiring job, switches. Let's start with the handlebar switch, finding a place where it's easily reachable with the rider's available left thumb. Securing it with the provided 4mm Allen bolt and 5/32 lock nut. I also like to mount it horizontally because it's a little more intuitive for me for the winch inside of the switch to be facing the inside of the bike. As far as the wires go, I noticed the green and black had similar connectors as the solenoid, so I began running them under the dash towards the solenoid. As far as this little red wire goes, it needs to be attached to a wire that gets power when the ignition is on. And since the cigarette lighter is conveniently located right next to our solenoid, its red power wire will be the perfect candidate. I quickly ordered these inline wiretapping connectors off the 2-minute shipping Amazon website, and then spliced and crimped our red wire and plugged into the connector that snapped onto the power wire for the cigarette lighter. Now if the handlebar switch is all you need, you can just plug in your green and black connectors to the solenoid and hook up your red and black to the battery and be done. But I figured it might also be handy on occasion to be able to operate your winch from off of the bike, so let's look at wiring up the remote plug. This looks like a good enough spot, so we'll mark it with a Sharpie and grab the drill. Starting with a pilot hole and using step-up drill bits, I'd stop and check every now and then to see if it fit yet, and I ended up with around a 1-inch hole for a perfect fit. Then I drilled a hole here and inserted the included Phillips bolt and followed suit on the other side, and secured the plug with the included 7mm lock nuts. As far as the 4 wires coming from this remote plug, the red with the eye hook went on the red pole on the solenoid, the white with the eye hook went on the black pole on the solenoid, and the green and black connectors plugged into the green and black wires I mentioned earlier coming from the solenoid. The green and black wires even had pigtails with the same connectors, allowing me to plug in the handlebar switch as well. Back to the art of cleaning up this mess of wires. I like to bundle them up with zip ties and electrical tape these smaller wires for additional protection. Now wires dangling in the fender well might be an issue, so let's pull them up under the dash and secure the bundle with zip ties. Now it's time for the serious moment of truth. Let's hook up our battery and see if these switches make the winch work. And if it don't work right away, don't stress. Troubleshooting is usually as simple as a poor connection or a wire in the wrong spot. You can see your winch installation instructions for more details. But since you watched this video and your winch does work, it's time to throw our plastics back on and enjoy a beard to a job well done. So I hope you found this video helpful. And if you did, do me a favor and give it a thumbs up so I know we're on the right track here. But if it was too detailed, not detailed enough, or if you have really any thoughts on how I can improve these videos, please leave me a comment in the section below so I can make these videos better. And of course, if you love Can-Ams as much as I do, you can always subscribe to this channel for more solid content. I'm Danny with Escape Powersports. I want to thank you for watching, and until next time, we'll see y'all on the trails.